The chandeliers sparkled above the marble dining hall like constellations frozen in time. Every corner of the mansion glimmered with wealth. The kind that silenced rooms and made people whisper about power. It was the grand estate of Alexander Grant. A self-made millionaire whose name was stamped on skyscrapers and stock tickers. Tonight he sat alone at the head of a dining table that stretched longer than most living rooms, pushing away his plate half-eaten. He didn't notice the faint shuffle in the corner. The almost soundless movement of someone trying not to exist. Down in the shadows between the kitchen and pantry, a woman crouched low, her hands trembling as she unwrapped a napkin. Inside it were scraps, half a piece of bread, a few spoonfuls of salad, and the edge of steak left cold on someone's plate. Her name was Maria. She'd been working in the Grant household for 3 months. Quiet, efficient, invisible. The kind of maid no one noticed until the floors stopped shining. But tonight, hunger had driven her past her limits. She hadn't eaten all day. She'd saved her portion for her son, Leo, who waited at home with a fever and an empty stomach. She thought she was safe. The kitchen staff had gone home. Mr. Grant had retired to his study. Or so she believed. She tore a small piece of bread, her eyes glistening as she whispered to herself, "Just a little, just enough to stop the dizziness." Then came the voice. Deep, controlled, unmistakably his. "What are you doing?" Maria froze. The napkin slipped from her hands, food scattering across the polished floor. Her body locked in panic. She turned slowly, and there he was. Alexander Grant himself, standing by the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable, the overhead light painted sharp edges on his features, highlighting the disbelief in his eyes. "Sir, she stammered, voice cracking. "I was just cleaning." He stepped closer, his tone not angry, but curious. "By eating leftovers." Tears welled up instantly. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I was just hungry." He looked down at her trembling hands. Her fingers were thin, nails chipped, knuckles rough. It wasn't the first time he'd seen struggle. He had grown up with it himself. But this felt personal, intrusive. He had trusted her in his home, and now he found her hiding in the dark. Eating scraps meant for the trash. He could have shouted. Fired her on the spot. That's what most people would have expected from a man like him. But instead, he asked quietly, "Why didn't you just ask for food?" Maria looked away, ashamed. Because maids don't ask, sir. We serve." The simplicity of her answer hit him like a punch to the chest. He exhaled, ran a hand through his hair and said, "Stand up." She hesitated. "I said stand up." Slowly she rose, eyes still fixed on the floor. He noticed the faint bruises around her wrist, old marks. Faded but not forgotten. The silence between them grew heavy, filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Alexander finally said, "Sit." She blinked. "Sir." He motioned toward a chair at the small breakfast table. "Sit down, Maria." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Please, sir, I can't." "Sit," he repeated firmly. She sat. Her whole body stiff, as if she were breaking a sacred rule. Without a word, Alexander turned toward the counter, uncovered the dish of untouched roast, and placed a generous portion on a plate. He poured water into a crystal glass, set it before her, and said simply, "Eat." Her eyes widened. "Sir, please, I can't eat where you eat," he said again, softer this time. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she picked up the fork. The first bite hit her like a flood of shame and relief. She chewed carefully, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I didn't want to steal, sir. My boy, he's sick. I gave him all I had." Alexander stood there, unmoving, watching her eat as if each bite told a story he hadn't heard yet. A story about hunger, survival, and quiet sacrifice. He didn't interrupt. Just listened to the unspoken pain filling the room. When she finished, she tried to clean the plate immediately, wiping her tears with her sleeve. He stopped her. "No, leave it." She froze again. He leaned forward slightly, voice low. "What's your son's name?" "Leo," she said, voice trembling. "He's 6. He hasn't been to school lately. I can't afford the medicine." Alexander nodded slowly, the wheels in his mind already turning. He had built his empire by solving problems. But this wasn't a problem. It was a mirror. A reflection of something he'd long forgotten. What it felt like to be powerless. "Go home," he said finally. "Take tomorrow off." Maria shook her head in panic. "No, sir, please, I can't lose this job." You're not losing it," he interrupted. "You're taking a day off. I'll send someone with you tomorrow." "Send someone?" She echoed, confused. "To your house," he said, his voice unreadable. I want to see where you live. Maria's breath caught. Fear flashed across her eyes. Please, no, my home isn't. But he had already turned away. The silence that followed was heavy and strange. The sound of his footsteps faded, but the echo of his words lingered in the air, wrapping around her like both a promise and a threat. That night, Maria walked home under the faint glow of streetlights, clutching the napkin she had dropped earlier. She couldn't sleep, her heart heavy with dread. Tomorrow, the man who owned skyscrapers would see the truth she had tried to hide. The world she called home. And for reasons she couldn't yet understand, that truth would change both of their lives forever. The morning sun broke through a pale mist, stretching across the city like golden silk. In the distance, the hum of engines and the rhythm of footsteps filled the waking streets. But at the edge of that city, far from glass towers and marble lobbies, the world changed. The buildings shrank. The streets cracked. And life looked raw, barely holding itself together. Maria's neighborhood sat near the outskirts. Rows of rusted rooftops and narrow alleyways where laundry lines crossed like tangled veins. Children ran barefoot, chasing old tires and laughter that didn't last long. Maria walked quickly, clutching her worn bag, hoping the day would pass quietly. But quiet wasn't what waited for her. A sleek black car appeared at the end of her street, drawing every eye. It didn't belong here. Its shine was out of place, its silence too heavy. The car slowed, and from it stepped a tall man in a gray suit. Alexander Grant. Maria froze. Her hands started shaking as she whispered to herself, "Oh nah, he actually came." The neighbors peeked from their windows. Some whispered, some stared. It wasn't every day a millionaire came walking down their street. Alexander scanned the surroundings. The crumbling walls, the uneven pavements, the faint smell of damp and oil. He saw a young boy sitting outside one of the houses, hugging a ragged stuffed bear. His clothes were clean but worn, and his eyes, bright yet tired, looked up as the stranger approached. "Leo?" Alexander asked softly. The boy nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm a friend of your mother's," he said carefully. "Is she home?" Leo's smile faded. "She's inside, sir. But please don't be mad at her. She works really hard." That sentence hit Alexander harder than he expected. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't defensive. It was pure, honest. He knelt slightly. "I'm not mad, son. Don't worry." Maria appeared at the door, breathless. "Mr. Grant. Please, this isn't." He raised a hand gently. "Relax, Maria. I said I wanted to see where you lived. That's all." Her home was small. A single room space with a creaky wooden floor, and faded curtains that couldn't hide the sunlight. There was a mattress in one corner, a broken fan, and a table with 2 plates, one cracked clean in half. On the stove, a small pot simmered with thin soup. Alexander stood silently, absorbing the details. The contrast between this place and his mansion was staggering. He'd spent millions designing spaces that felt warm and human. Yet here, in this tiny shack, warmth was something real. Maria stood nervously, her hands twisting together. "Sir, I didn't mean to disrespect you last night." He interrupted softly. "Stop apologizing." Her words caught in her throat. He turned to Leo. "How are you feeling, buddy?" Leo shrugged. "I'm okay, sir, just get tired fast. Mama says I'll be better soon." Alexander's gaze shifted to the medicine shelf, or what was left of it. 3 bottles. All empty, one labeled for antibiotics, another for fever. His chest tightened. He asked quietly, "Maria, when was the last time he saw a doctor?" She looked down. 2 months ago. I couldn't afford to take him again." Alexander's jaw tensed. "You didn't ask for help." Her eyes filled with tears. "I told you, sir. Maids don't ask." The silence stretched. Leo looked between them, confused. Then Alexander did something that startled them both. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and said, "Send Dr. Reynolds to my location." "Now." Maria's eyes widened. "Sir, please. You don't have to." "I do," he said firmly. "You've worked under my roof for months without saying a word. The least I can do is make sure your son is okay." Minutes later, a white SUV pulled up outside. A doctor and nurse stepped in, bringing equipment that seemed foreign to the little room. They checked Leo, took notes, and whispered things Maria couldn't understand. When they left, Alexander said quietly, "He'll be fine. But he needs treatment, proper food, vitamins, rest." Maria pressed her hand over her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to." "Don't thank me yet," he interrupted. "This shouldn't have happened in the first place. I thought I was running a good house." But I didn't even see what was happening right under my roof. He looked around again, his voice growing heavy. You wake up before dawn, clean every room in that mansion, polish silver you'll never touch, and then come home to this. Maria's face flushed with embarrassment. It's all I can afford. But it's home. Alexander nodded slowly. Maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. She frowned, confused. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked toward the door, taking one last look at the small home. The cracked walls, the little drawings Leo had taped beside the window, the way poverty somehow still made space for love. When he turned back, his expression had changed. Softer, resolved. I'll be back tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow. Yes, he said quietly. There's something I need to do first. And with that, he left. Maria watched from the doorway, the car vanishing down the street like a shadow returning to a brighter world. She didn't understand what he meant. But in her chest, something stirred. Hope, fear. Both at once. Later that night, as Leo slept beside her, Maria whispered to herself, he's a kind man. But kind men don't return twice. She didn't know that somewhere, miles away in his mansion, Alexander sat in his study, staring at an old photograph of his own mother. Her hands rough from work, her eyes tired but full of love. He hadn't looked at that photo in years. But now, Maria's face had brought every memory back. And before the night ended, he made a decision that would change all their lives forever. Silence. In the mansion's vast kitchen, breakfast was being prepared as usual. Fine china laid out, coffee brewed, and the smell of buttered croissants filling the air. But Alexander Grant sat untouched before his meal, staring into nothing. His assistant Claire hesitated near the door, clutching her tablet. Sir, she ventured softly. You cancelled all your meetings today. Should I? He raised a hand gently. Not today, Claire. Yes, sir. She turned to leave, but curiosity got the better of her. Is everything all right? He looked up slowly, and for the first time in years, she saw something unfamiliar in his eyes. Guilt. Do you remember Maria, the maid who works the late shift? Claire nodded. Of course, she's quiet. Efficient, never complains. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. Yesterday, I found her hiding in the kitchen, eating leftovers. Claire froze, unsure how to respond. That's awful. Should I have HR handle it? He shook his head sharply. No, you're missing the point. She wasn't stealing for greed. She was starving. Claire's eyes softened. You helped her. I tried. But it's not enough. He murmured, rubbing his temples. You know, Claire, when I was 12, my mother used to work as a maid. She'd come home every night with bruises on her hands, smelling of bleach. Some nights, she'd pretend she'd eaten, but I knew she hadn't. She'd wait for me to fall asleep before scraping cold food from plates the rich left behind. The words came out broken, each one heavy with regret. Claire had worked with Alexander for 8 years and had never heard him talk like this. He went on, his voice barely above a whisper. I swore I'd never let anyone make me feel small again. But in chasing that I became blind to the people who lived the same story I came from. A long silence stretched. Then Alexander stood abruptly. I'm going to see Maria again. Claire blinked. Sir, you have the charity gala tonight. He interrupted. Cancel it. If they ask why, tell them I found something more important. Sue. When Alexander's car pulled up in Maria's neighborhood later that morning, the children once again gathered to stare. But this time, behind him came a van marked, Grant Foundation. Workers carried boxes, medicine, groceries, blankets, and cleaning supplies. Maria stood outside, stunned. Sir, what is all this? He smiled faintly. Just a small start. Leo needs proper care. And you? He paused, looking her straight in the eyes. You deserve a chance to live, not just survive. Her lips trembled. You don't have to do this. I know, he said simply. But I want to. He motioned for the team to start unloading. Within minutes, her small home was transformed. Fresh sheets replaced the torn ones, a new fan replaced the broken one, and Leo's bed was lifted onto a sturdy frame. Maria stood frozen, her hands over her mouth, tears falling silently. Sir, this is too much, she whispered. I don't know how to repay. You already did, he said softly. Last night, when you made me remember who I was. She didn't understand what he meant, but she saw sincerity in his eyes. A kind she hadn't seen in anyone of his stature before. Then Leo ran up to Alexander, clutching his little teddy bear. Look, Mama says I can sleep without coughing tonight. Alexander knelt, smiling. That's right, champ. And soon, you'll be strong enough to run again. The boy beamed, and for a fleeting moment, the world seemed simple. But as the sun climbed higher, shadows began to stretch. One of the neighbors, an older man named Ramos, stepped forward cautiously. "Sir, not to be ungrateful, but why are you helping her? No rich man ever came here unless he wanted something." Alexander met his gaze steadily. "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe no one comes unless they want something." The man said nothing more, but his doubtful eyes lingered. Later that afternoon, as Alexander and Maria sat outside her small porch drinking tea, she asked the question she'd been holding in all day. "Why me, sir? There are thousands of people like us. Why did you help me?" He looked out at the narrow street, the children laughing, the laundry fluttering in the wind. "Because yesterday, when I saw you eating those scraps, I saw my mother. And I saw myself. What I could have become if life hadn't turned in my favor. I realized how close we all are to falling, Maria. Just one bad turn away." Her eyes filled with quiet tears. "Your mother must have been proud of you." He smiled sadly. "She died before she saw any of this." He gestured vaguely, meaning his empire. "I buried her in a cheap grave because I couldn't afford a coffin back then. I told myself I'd never be poor again, but I forgot. Richness isn't in marble floors or shiny plates." Maria nodded slowly, whispering, "It's in hearts." He looked at her with something like gratitude. "Yes. In hearts." For a long moment neither spoke. The world around them moved quietly. Breezes rustling the curtains, the faint sound of a child's laughter. Finally, Alexander stood. "Maria. I have a proposal." Her heartbeat quickened. "Proposal? I want to start a new program through my foundation," he said. "One that helps single parents, especially those working domestic jobs. I want you to help me run it." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Sir, I'm not educated enough for that. I can barely write English properly." He smiled. "Then I'll teach you. You have something more important than degrees. You have the heart I've been missing in my entire organization." Maria covered her face, sobbing softly. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he replied gently. She nodded, tears still falling. "Yes, sir. Yes." Alexander reached into his pocket and placed an envelope on the table. "This is your first salary. Advanced." When she opened it, her hands shook. $5,000. "Sir, I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "And you will. Because from now on, Maria, you're not just my maid." He smiled faintly. "You're my partner." The word, partner, echoed in her heart long after he left that day. But as the sun dipped below the horizon and Maria watched the taillights disappear, she couldn't shake a quiet, haunting feeling, like life was about to test both of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. Because the world has a way of questioning kindness. And sometimes kindness itself becomes the storm before redemption. Next few weeks moved like a dream Maria was afraid to wake from. Her mornings no longer began with scrubbing marble floors in silence or hiding hunger beneath politeness. Instead, she walked through the front doors of the Grant Foundation, wearing a neatly pressed blouse Alexander had insisted she buy, holding her head a little higher than before. At first, everyone stared. Some whispered. A few smiled politely, unsure how a woman who once cleaned tables now sat beside the CEO. But Alexander didn't care for appearances. He'd made his decision, and that was final. Her new role wasn't glamorous. She organized donations, helped design care packages for low-income families, and met with domestic workers to understand their needs. Yet for her, it was everything. Each folder she filled, each mother she spoke to, made her feel seen for the first time in her life. Alexander watched her from a distance most days. He noticed the way she smiled gently when talking to the women, how she listened like every story mattered. She wasn't educated in business, but she had something none of his executives possessed: human empathy. Still, not everyone shared his admiration. One evening, as he returned from a meeting, Claire entered his office hesitantly. "Sir, we need to talk." He looked up from his laptop. "About Maria," she said quietly. "People are talking. The board thinks you've become emotionally involved. That this whole project is, well, sentimental." He leaned back, his gaze sharpening. "Sentimental?" Claire sighed. "You're using company funds to help one of your employees. They're calling it favoritism. They think she's taking advantage of you." He froze. His mind flashed back to Maria's trembling hands, her quiet gratitude, the tiny home filled with laughter despite its cracks. "She's not taking advantage," he said evenly. "She's working harder than anyone in this building." "I know that." Claire said softly. But perception matters. If this gets out, it could ruin your reputation. The press loves stories like this. Millionaire falls for poor Maid. You know how it'll sound. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick with the weight of what was left unsaid. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that what you think this is, Claire? Some kind of affair? Her voice faltered. No, sir. But people will assume it. I'm just warning you. He looked out the window, his reflection caught in the glass. Half light, half shadow. Let them assume what they want, he murmured. For once, I'm doing something that actually matters. Claire lowered her gaze. Then be prepared to fight for it. Because they will test you. And they did. Rumors spread fast. Within days, whispers became headlines. Business tycoon defends maid-turned-employee. Charity or infatuation. Anonymous articles questioned Maria's past, some even suggesting she'd manipulated him. She found herself being followed by reporters. Her son's school asking questions, her neighbors looking at her differently. Maria tried to hide the newspaper clippings from Leo, but one morning he saw the front page at the grocery store. He read the words slowly, confusion in his young eyes. Mama, they're saying bad things about you. She smiled weakly. Kneeling beside him. Don't listen to that, baby. Sometimes people just don't like it when others get a chance to be happy. But inside, her heart ached. When she arrived at the foundation that day, she could feel the tension in every glance. Whispers chased her down the hall. And when she entered Alexander's office, she found him pacing by the window. Phone in hand. They printed it anyway, he muttered. I told them it was false, but they don't care. Maria swallowed hard. Sir, maybe I should resign. This is hurting your name. He turned sharply. No. Don't you dare. But, Maria, he said, his tone softening, if you walk away now, you let them win. They want to turn kindness into scandal. They can't understand that someone like me could help someone like you without expecting something in return. Tears welled in her eyes. But what if they're right, sir? What if I'm just bringing trouble? He shook his head. No, you've brought purpose. The sincerity in his voice silenced her. Then he added, almost in a whisper, you know what hurts the most? The people who built me up, partners, investors, friends. They're the first ones to doubt me for doing something human. Maria reached out tentatively, her voice trembling. Maybe it's because they forgot what being human feels like. Alexander looked at her then. Really looked at her. And something shifted in his expression. The hardened businessman was gone. In his place stood a man rediscovering his soul. But the world doesn't forgive vulnerability easily. That evening, as he drove Maria home to ensure she and Leo were safe from the reporters camping outside her street, a stone shattered against the car door. A group of locals, stirred by gossip and envy, shouted, "She's using you. Open your eyes, rich man." Maria screamed, clutching Leo in panic. Alexander jumped out, fury flashing through him, but the crowd scattered before he could speak. When he turned back, Maria's tears broke him. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I never wanted this to happen." She shook her head, sobbing. "I just wanted to feed my son, sir. I never asked for fame or pity." He knelt beside her, voice low but firm. "Listen to me. You've done nothing wrong. The world will always attack what it doesn't understand. But I promise you, I won't let them destroy what we're building." Her eyes met his, fearful, trusting, searching. "Why, sir? Why fight for me?" He hesitated, then said quietly. "Because maybe, I'm not just saving you, Maria. Maybe you're saving me." The words lingered between them like an unspoken truth neither dared to touch. Outside, the night deepened. Flashlights flickered in the distance, the media hungry for another image, another headline. But inside that car, amidst fear and uncertainty, something real had begun to grow. A bond stronger than pity. Deeper than gratitude. Neither of them knew it yet, but the storm that had started with whispers was about to become the turning point of both their lives. Low but never raining. The world outside grew louder. Tabloids, social media, even television anchors dissecting their every move. The words Maid, Millionaire, affair filled every headline, painted with venom and half-truth. Maria stopped going to the foundation for a week. Every time she stepped outside, cameras flashed. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. Her son Leo asked, "Mama, why are people angry with you?" And she had no answer that could make sense to a child. Meanwhile, Alexander was fighting a war of his own. In the grand boardroom of Grant Industries, a dozen men in suits sat around the long table, their expressions sharp and accusing. Your image is collapsing, Alex. One of them barked. You've built $1 billion company on trust and discipline. And now you're throwing it all away for a maid. Alexander leaned forward, his tone cold but steady. Watch your words. We're not saying she's guilty. Another executive added quickly. But perception is everything. Investors are pulling back, sponsors are hesitating. You have to cut her off publicly. Announce that she's no longer part of your foundation. He looked at them, disbelief shadowing his features. You want me to abandon her to protect my reputation? Yes. One of them said bluntly. Before she drags you down with her. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Only the faint ticking of the wall clock breaking it. Then Alexander stood slowly, his chair scraping against the marble. I started this company from nothing, he said, his voice like quiet thunder. When I had no roof, no shoes, no friends. None of you were there. And now you think I'll sell my humanity for stock prices? No. He turned, his gaze sweeping across them. If this board can't stand by me when I do the right thing, then maybe I built the wrong company. Without another word, he walked out. The next morning, the media had a new story. Alexander Grant resigns as CEO of Grant Industries. The news rippled through the city like an earthquake. Stocks fell. Journalists camped outside his gates. His empire, years of ambition and sacrifice, was now slipping away. Maria saw the headlines with trembling hands. She ran to his mansion, pushing past guards who tried to stop her. Where is he? She cried. She found him in the garden, sitting quietly beneath an oak tree, staring at nothing. He looked tired, but not defeated. Like a man stripped of everything false. Why did you do that? She asked, voice breaking. Why throw it all away for me? He looked up slowly. Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. She fell to her knees beside him. You've lost everything because of me. He shook his head gently. No, Maria. I lost everything because I forgot what mattered. You just reminded me. Her eyes filled with tears. I can't let you suffer for my sake. I'll leave the city. Take Leo. You'll never see me again. Alexander reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it touched hers. Don't you dare run. You've done nothing wrong. But I've destroyed your life, she whispered. He gave a faint, wary smile. You've given me one instead. For a long time, they sat in silence. The air smelled of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. A low promise of storm. That evening, Leo came running out to the garden, holding a small drawing. Mr. Grant. Look. I made this for you. Alexander took it carefully. It showed 3 stick figures, Leo, Maria and him, smiling under a big yellow sun. At the bottom, in crooked letters, it read, Thank you for helping my mama. Something broke inside Alexander then. He closed his eyes, holding the paper against his chest, whispering, You two have given me more than money ever could. But fate wasn't done testing them yet. Later that night, as the rain finally began to fall, headlights flashed outside the mansion gate. A black car pulled up. His former business partner, Victor Hale, stepping out with a smug smile. Quite the mess you've made, Alex, Victor said, stepping under the umbrella of arrogance he always carried. You could have avoided all this if you'd just listened. Alexander stood, his posture calm. I did what was right. Victor laughed. Right? You destroyed your empire for a housemaid. You'll lose everything. Maybe. Alexander said quietly. But I'll lose it with a soul intact. Victor's smirk faltered for just a second before he muttered, You'll regret this. And turned to leave. When the car drove away, Maria came out onto the porch, drenched by the rain. Who was that? She asked. Someone who reminds me of who I used to be. He replied softly. She stepped closer, the rain blurring her tears. Sir, I don't know how to make any of this right. He looked at her for a long time. You already have, Maria. Just don't give up. And yet, as they stood there beneath the storm, they both knew. Life had a way of breaking those who dared to care. The next morning, Maria woke to the sound of Leo coughing violently. His fever had returned, worse than before. Panic surged through her chest. She rushed him to the hospital, her hands shaking as she begged the nurse for help. Hours passed like shadows creeping along a wall. Alexander arrived just as the doctor came out, his face grave. The infection spread, he said quietly. We'll need to transfer him to a private facility immediately. But the treatment will be expensive. Alexander's voice was steady but his heart trembled. Do whatever it takes. I'll cover everything. The doctor nodded and walked away. Maria collapsed into a chair sobbing. Please God, not my son. Alexander knelt beside her, holding her hands tightly. He'll be fine, I promise. But deep inside, he was terrified. For the first time in his life, money couldn't buy certainty. And as the monitors beeped steadily in the